Hey, so this is the Drunkalogs, a podcast about addiction and recovery in which each guest shares their version of how it was, what happened, and how it is now, and then endures a half-hour Q&A at the hands of your host, Nick Morton. My next guest is a very funny stand-up comedian who does something on stage that is unlike any performance I have ever seen before. She's Canadian and has appeared on Conan and Last Comic Standing, and she talks here about how she finally got sober when her addiction started to interfere with her career in a way she could no longer tolerate. She also talks about an addiction to chaos, which we didn't really explore here, and I wonder now, in hindsight, if that impulse, at least for me, isn't a retreat to the comfort of something familiar, even if that familiarity is totally destructive. In any event, won't you please welcome Debra DiGiovanni?
Okay, great. Hi, everybody. I'm Debra DiGiovanni. I'm a comedian from Canada. I spent most of my life in Toronto in the comedy scene, and I've been in Los Angeles now. This is year 6.5, exactly 6.5. You know what I mean? I moved in January of 14? I want to say. And I'm a comedian. I'm a stand-up comedian. I've been very fortunate.
How long have you been sober? Just out of curiosity.
4.5 years.
4.5 years.
Well, let me tell you this. This is it. I haven't had alcohol in I'm going to say 14 years. But right. I am, and I know this is very classic addict, but alcohol was never really my problem. Right. I honestly stopped drinking alcohol because it just didn't work for me, and Sure. It just stopped working for me.
Yeah.
And I did most of my drinking when I was a young person. Most of my drinking was the heaviest drinking was between 14 and 24.
Right.
And then by the time I was 20, I started smoking pot.
Right.
And then by the time I was 24, I had a boyfriend who was a big pothead.
Right.
So then the two of us just sunk right into weed, and I liked it better. Do you know what I mean? I just did. It never made me sick. I never got bed spins or cried in public, that kind of thing.
Right.
So really by the time I was 24, I slowed down on alcohol, and then probably by the time I was 34, I was done.
Right.
Alcohol.
And so where in Canada did you grow up?
Toronto, so
right.
East Coast.
So the whole time in Toronto.
Yeah, and I grew up in a small town. You see, this is the thing. I grew up in a very small town called Tillsonburg, which is southwestern Ontario.
Right.
Probably 2.5 hours outside of Toronto. So,
right.
Starting to drink at 14, which I know now isn't early. Do you know what I mean? My brain, I think, oh my God, I was a child. But now I know, my God, kids drink at 11. You know what I mean? That's not, but because it was a small town, alcohol was just, it was a given. I remember
right.
at 12 going, I'm never going to drink. And by the time I started high school, we were getting drunk, both nights of the weekend. There was nothing to do, and that small, and sort of that angry small town mentality of I hate the town, that kind of thing. So we were partiers,
What did your parents do? Were they professional people?
Well, here's the thing. My dad was a chartered accountant. He owned an accounting firm in town,
right.
and my mom was a mom.
Right.
My mom stayed home with us.
And how many siblings?
Yeah, and it was a small. My parents are. There's a big family. I have a twin sister,
right.
2 older sisters, and a little brother. So there's
right.
7 in the family in total. And they were very. My parents are very religious. They were, by the time I was 12, they were very they changed churches and found Christ. And so they were super religious.
Oh, wow.
And super strict. Yeah. My mother's father, I found out much later because he probably already died by the time I was 11. And no, he definitely died, not probably. But, I was saying probably by the time. No, trust me, he's gone. But you don't have to check on that. But I found out later in life that he was an alcoholic.
Right.
And because my mother hated alcohol. My mother abhorred alcohol. It made her insane. So she never drank. I never saw anyone me and my parents never even had a glass of wine. Just
wow.
never, ever. My older sister who was, not once. My older sister who was 2 years older than me liked to drink. And she
right.
was a partier in
right.
high school. So by the time me and my twin sister got to high school, she was already the cool one. And like we could go to parties because my older sister was already there. You know what I mean?
And was
so
she
I got
getting
drunk with her the first time.
Were your
What's that?
parents aware, or were they?
They were suspicious, but we were all, I mean, I guess we thought we were clever, but not really. Like I got caught a lot, you know what I mean? I just did. Like I was constantly grounded, that kind of thing. But it sort of didn't like, now looking back, it's like, they definitely knew, but there was no, and they would ground us. And then somewhere along the line, the grounding would stop and I don't even, you know what I mean? You're grounded for 3 months. And then like after a month, we weren't anymore. I don't know. It was like, I don't know I don't know why that's so unclear, but it's like, I don't really remember them. Yeah. Like I remember my mother screaming at us and stuff, but we just carried on. We just did like you do, find a way, you just do. And so it was, like school dances and, things like that. And, but yeah, like, my nickname in high school was Tank because I could drink so much, it was, I could put away booze. I really could. But then by the time I got to, when I moved to Toronto to go to college, I went to art school. It was like, it was super expensive. And like going to a bar was like, the drinks were expensive. And it was just kind of like, oh, okay. And then we just, I don't know, like my roommates and a boyfriend at the time, we just turned to weed.
Right.
And so drinking became less. And then probably between the years of like 19 and 24, I did a lot of LSD. We did quite a bit of acid. And because again, it was cheap and it was fun and, whatever. But then really for me, like it was more like, it was just like party drugs and everything was fine. But by the time I had started doing comedy, I started about 28.
What
I was
led
smoking
you
way more weed. Like I was just known as a pothead.
What led you to comedy?
Oh gosh, it was I had probably by the time I was in college, it was sort of like one of those things where everyone was like, "Have you ever thought of being a comedian?" I was like, "No." Like it didn't even dawn on me. It didn't even dawn on me to perform. I knew I made my friends laugh.
Right.
And I was the funny one and that was it, but I didn't think about it. And then I went to school. I went to this art school and legitimately like, you do like a presentation in a class.
Yeah.
You know what I mean? Like that was like part of the grade was like 40% on your presentation. I would fucking nail those. I would rock those. And I had like instructors. I had professors come to me and say, yeah, you're a lovely artist, but have you thought of performing? And I'm like, what? And I just, I just kind of ignored it for a while. And all my friends would say, maybe you should perform. And then by the time I started comedy at about 27. So by the time I was like 25, I started taking improv classes and things like that. And then I eventually landed on stand-up. And Toronto has a great comedy scene. So I was able to really dive in very easily there. And I started in the year 2000. So like 20 years ago, I was able to really perform a lot. You know what I mean? I just really was.
Sure.
And the thing is with Canada, Canada, I mean, it just was. And Canada, even though marijuana, just sort of became legal like 2 or 3 years ago, it's always been lax.
Right.
Like it was never like, Jim, it's not like the States, like where like you go to prison for marijuana.
Right.
It just never it just didn't happen. Like, I mean, I remember like hundreds of times, like hearing stories of like, oh yeah, and then I just had to throw it away. And myself, like, we'd be outside, doing something, smoking a joint, and a cop would walk by and be like, hey guys, put that out. You'd be like, okay. And that would be it.
Right.
That would literally be it. I know, oh, sorry. And then sometimes they would maybe take your weed and then you'd be like, oh, fuck. And that would be as bad as it got, right?
Sure.
So it was like, weed was very easy,
Yeah.
Yeah, so then by the time I was sort of established in the comedy scene, I was known as a pothead. Like I was just known as a stoner and everyone knew after shows, Debra always had joints, that was it. And then by the time I was very lucky, I had some real lucky breaks in my comedy career. So I was able to quit my day job by about like 6 years in. Okay. I got to go on tour with the guy. And
what were some of those breaks like? What just like?
Well, that was the thing. It's like I before I started performing comedy, I worked at a TV station and that was just a fluke. That was like, I needed a job and my friends were like, you should call the TV station. I was like, okay. And it was our music station. It was like, Canadian MTV.
Right.
So I became the receptionist. And then with that became like, I literally called like, I was like, hi, I'm looking for a job as a receptionist. And the woman in the HR was like, someone quit today. Can you start tomorrow? And I was like,
Wow.
yeah. And then it just became this like, yeah, it was like a really cool place to work. And they let you like do stuff. You know, like, you're funny. Do you want to do stuff on air? And I was like, okay. So like, it sort of just to really push me in the way of comedy. And then so when I quit that job after about 4 years to do, you know, I was like, I'm gonna do comedy. And, you know, a show started on the music channel, and it was called Video on Trial. And it was basically a talking head show. It started in 2006, and it was like, basically we made fun of videos. And because I worked there, the producers they were like, does Debra do comedy? We'll get Debra in. Where everyone else had to audition, I just got the job. And that show, I worked on it from 2006 to 2013. That show, it was, oh my God. It's most grateful for that. It was, by 2008, like there were times like I couldn't walk down the street in Toronto because we would be mobbed by teenagers. Like it was just like, it was famous. Yeah. In Canada, you know, which is, you know, let's be honest.
But I mean,
it's fine. You know, but I mean,
famous in the market where you can,
so easy.
And then you could go do
That's where I can work. Yes.
Because they're like,
that's exactly it. And so it was like, and it just paved the way. So it was very, very fortunate. So by about 2006, I didn't have a day job. And then because of that too, like, you know, a comedian who's like a fucking billionaire now, Russell Peters, took me on tour with him. He was like, do you want to open for me? And I was like, okay. And so then, so it was, by then it was like, I'm good. But then because of that, we just quadrupled. Do you know what I mean?
You don't have
which
to
comes ease, right? Life and money. Oh. You know what I mean? All I did was stand up, and I would go and do this show, and it only took us like an hour to shoot, you know? So it was like, I had a lot of free time. And by this point I was single, and I just found myself smoking and all the time. And then it was like, you know, wake and bake, and I'd be like, oh, just weekends. And then it was like Mondays. And then it just got to the point where I just found myself smoking all the time. I was just always high. And, you know, I would travel for comedy, but it was usually in Canada. And I had someone in every major city in Canada that could hook me up with weed. So I never had to go without weed. And it just really started like by 2011, I'd say, like, it was like, I started realizing, I have a problem. Like I'm in trouble. And I started saying to my best friend, like, you know, I need to stop.
It's
and
funny.
She's like, you know what? I support you. And
what's a weed problem? Like, what are the consequences of a weed problem? I mean, everyone sort of laughs. Because a lot of ways,
they do.
Weed is so much healthier than booze, but like,
yes. Oh God. And it is too. And that's the thing too. It's like a lot. And I mean, still to this day, when I say, oh, like I'm a drug addict, people go, but it was weed. Like, yeah, absolutely. I mean, you know what I mean? Because it's not like, you know, meth.
Yeah. You're not like,
for me, it was, you know what I mean? It's like, no, my God, I'm not, my God, you know, I'm not, there's no needles involved, but it's still, for me, like, it was just all I wanted to do. That's it. And because it still wasn't technically legal, you know, I found myself spending a lot more time at home, and like there'd be things that I would have to go to and I would cancel because I'd rather be high. And so it was like after shows, like, you know, like standing in a joint circle, I'd be like, no, I'm not sharing with you, you assholes. I get 2 halls, I'm out. And I would, so then it just, like, my best way is like my life became small. Do you know what I mean? Like, it was like, it just started, like, all I did was, and then I would leave, and then I started to get like isolated and reclusive. And by the time I moved to LA in 2014, and then I got here, and people were like, you just need to get a medical marijuana card. And I walked into the first dispensary. I was just like, oh, I'm in big fucking trouble. Like, I just knew that. Because in Canada, it was like you know what I mean? Some dude came to your door in a van, and he was all like, here's your weed. And you're like, thanks. But then I show up in LA, and I'm like, oh my God, I get to choose, and there's flavors and strengths. And it was just that the first 2 years of living in LA, all I did was smoke. I wasted so much time.
What brought you to LA?
that was, it just got to that point where it was like, I was very fortunate in Canada, and I'd been working on some shows, and the shows did get renewed. And it was just that moment. And I had my visa because I'd worked on Last Comic Standing, and they gave me my visa, my working visa. And so I was like, I might as well use this. And it just got to that point where I was like, I might as well give it a go. Right. And I also felt like I was like
on a show like Last Comic Standing, where the stakes seem so high and the production value and everything is so monumental, and you're fucking stoned. Is that, but I mean, I guess that's what you're going through life.
Here's the thing. I was going to say, I on my year was Doug Benson. You know what I mean? Like, it's like, it was, weed was not a problem. It just wasn't. So it was like, so that was the thing. It was just like, and everything just kind of kept me in a position of like, you can keep smoking and keep moving, just keep chugging along. Right. And then, and it's like, and comedy is like, they just lent to stoners. Like, it just did.
Did you feel your comedy was suffering at that point or no?
Yes, I did. And that was the thing. That was the thing. By about 2011, I thought, and here's what it was, because when it starts fucking with my comedy, that's when I'm going to stop.
Right.
And it started fucking with comedy in this way. I would cancel a lot.
Oh,
like, there is definitely, I did a tour last year. Oh yeah. I became a canceller. And like even now it makes me cringe. Like, I just go, oh my God. Like when I did my 12 steps and having to do amendments, ninth step, I had to call comedy clubs and festivals and be like, I'm so sorry. Like, I mean, I like literally, there was a festival in like 2012 maybe. And I was at the airport and I was like, no, I'm going home. Fuck it. I'm leaving. And I went home. I called from the airport and said, made up some bullshit lie. It was like, I'm out. Like,
I mean, cold, sober, low stakes.
I mean,
I almost bail on every show, and like, but like, I have this thing in my head that I'm never going to bail on a show. Like, it doesn't matter how bad I feel, or how crazy I am, I'm going to show up and do the show.
Especially when you get fucking paid, when you're getting paid. Like, these people were paying me. It was going to be televised, and I was all like, I'm out. And I just went home in a cab and made up this big bullshit story. And then that didn't even faze me. I was like, good. And then just called my dealer, met him when I got home. Like, that was it. And that. So people going, oh, weed. And I was like, you know what? Because I know that there are people that can smoke weed and it's fine.
Sure.
But I was just not one of those people. I smoked too much. I smoked all the time, and I never let anything come between me and weed. Just ever, ever, ever. So that's when it started, when I realized, and I had that, moment of clarity going, oh, fuck, I can't. And then I started to get a bad reputation. And I'd worked so hard in comedy. And then everyone I did a tour this past November, and with a big successful name in Canada. And he's such a wonderful man. And he had booked the people to work with him. And he had said to me, he was like, the only reason that he's like, I've always been a fan. He's like, but when they had said, what about Debra DiGiovanni? And he was just like, oh no, I hear she's, a pothead and she cancels. And thank God the woman that was running it was like, oh no, Deborah's been sober for 4 years. And he was like, great, she can come. It's like, that's the only reason you're here. And I was like, yeah, good, thank you.
Wow.
Because I started getting the reputation of being a canceller, and that's like, even now I say it and it makes me I'm so embarrassed. So embarrassed. Like, it's just like, that's not who I am. Do you know what I mean? It's like, I have a good work ethic, but I'm just an addict, So it was like, ooh, so embarrassed, right?
I was going to say, like, such a big part of recovery is just like showing up, and like, I didn't start doing comedy until I was sober.
Showing up.
And so for me, like, to not, to not show up, it's like, it's like, well, I have to show up. I said I would show up. I'll show up and I'll be
Yes. I said I could show up. And exactly. And I'll mail it in, and I don't give a fuck, and I'm serious. Same thing.
Right, but at least show up.
And it's also, too, it's like, and lying, at least show up, and also lying. I won't lie now.
Right.
I will not lie. Like, if I really can't do something, I'm just honest. Like, I'll be honest. Like, there's, like, whatever. You know what? I'm sorry. I'm not feeling well. Like, I'm mentally not up for it. I'll still come if you want, but I'm operating at 60%. Right. And often they go, you know what? We'll just rebook you. And I go, okay. But I'm honest now. Like, I'm not going to be like, this happened. No, I'm just like, I'm in a bad mood. I'm shitty. I'm still going to come and I'm going to do my best. But, it's just, it's honesty. Like, that's the big thing for me, because I'm such a liar.
Anyway, you were saying the first 2 years.
As most drug addicts are.
Yeah. You were saying
the first 2 years in LA were just awful. All I did was get high, and I canceled so much stuff. Like I just, I had a management team, and like it got to the point where they were like, "What are you doing?" And I was just like,
Right.
"Yeah, I don't know.
Right.
And then it was Christmas 2015, and I just like it was December 2015, and it just everything started to push me towards it's time. It's just time. And so I talked to my best friend who she's a therapist, and her specialty is addiction. And she was just like, you know what, let's just get ready for you to quit. And I was like, yeah,
Right.
okay. So I chose, I was just like, okay, I'm going to, and I had that thing where I was just like, I read some stuff on quitting marijuana, and I just chose myself. Like, I was like, what I'm going to do is that I'm going to stay Christmas. I'm going to smoke my fucking self like to death. I'm just going to, bought like
Right.
a pound of weed or something ridiculous. And I was like, after this is done, I'm done. And it was like December 18th, and I did nothing but binge watch TV, eat, and smoke.
Right.
And then on January 4th, I woke up on January 4th, and I smoked of 2016, and I smoked a joint, and it was like trash in my mouth. Like I couldn't even finish it. I was like, no, it just tasted awful. And then I just called my best friend, and we FaceTimed, and I was like, it's done. And she was just like, okay, what do we do? And I went and collected all my stuff, my grinder and my bongs and my whatever. And on FaceTime, I walked it out to the big garbage can out back. And I said, let's do this. I took my medical marijuana card. I cut it up in front of her, threw it in the garbage, went back into my apartment. And I had like, because I was a big joint smoker. I rarely did bongs or vapes or anything. I was just a smoker. And I had like a dozen joints still rolled. And she just watched me as I broke them up, threw them down the toilet, flushed the toilet. And January 4th, 2016, last day I ever smoked.
Wow. And then did you get help for support? I did.
I went to AA. I went to AA.
Right.
I went to AA for a long, because I was also like, again, at this point I hadn't had alcohol in years and years and years, but I was just like, addiction is addiction, right? Mm-hmm. Addiction is addiction.
Sure, totally.
So I went to AA. Yeah, I went to AA for weed. That's basically because I constantly heard people saying I'm an addict, and that's all I said. I'm an addict. That was it. And there's a couple marijuana addict meetings, but there was like literally 2. So I was just I went into those, but then it's just like there was a lot of AA meetings. There's so many, and so that's what I did. I did that. I probably went to AA for about 2 years,
right? And
then I moved over into the food program, because then I realized, oh, actually that's my bigger problem. Right. And so then I've been in OA for 3 years now. So, right. And that's it. So sober from weed for 4 years and 6 months, and
And how? I'm curious how both your life and your actual comedy has changed since then.
Yeah. Okay. So one of the big fears, and I'm sure a lot of people think this, especially for weed, am I going to be funny anymore? Am I still going to be funny? And honestly, that was it. Honestly, your brain tricks you and goes, no.
Yeah.
The only reason you're funny is because you write when you're high, you are high, all of these things. And I legitimately was terrified. And then I remember, my therapist saying to me, you are funny. It's like, it won't change with marijuana. He's like, because, he's like, you're funny and you're honest. Like, what you talk about is what's happening. He's like, so talk about quitting marijuana, talk about being so, and I trusted him. I went to the 12 steps. I trusted them. And, to be honest, I like my comedy more now. Like, I feel sharper. I feel more present. I'm there. I write more. I just am. Like, I just know I'm sharper. I'm because I'm clear-headed. I'm there. Do you know what I mean? Like, I'm there. Like, often, like, on stage high.
Sorry, I interrupted you, but I've watched you do comedy a bunch.
No, please.
And like, I do find you're so present that it seems you're making it up as you go along. And I'm wondering, how much of it are you making up? Because sometimes it really seems like you've got your little book.
Well, you know what?
And you've got your little note. You're like, you know what? I'm not going to talk about that. You know what? Fuck my cat.
It's so delightful. It's so delightful.
Thank you. Thank you very much. Now there is an element of writing on stage in the moment. I really do. Like when I'm really having fun, I come off stage and go, I don't know what I just said. Like I have no idea what I was just talking about. You know what I mean? And it's so funny because it's like, but that to me is being present because I'm so in the moment. Like if I haven't recorded it or someone's not going to tell me, I forget. But it really is. And like there were definitely times like, like stumbling, like I was always like stumbling over words and like having moments. Like I remember several times, like often me going, did I say that already? Like saying that on stage, going, I already said that? Right. I mean, oh my God. Right. Because then the audience goes, what's going on? Like, do you, what? It's awful. It's awful. So that, so definitely. So if anyone is listening and they're scared that sober is going to make you less, whatever you are, less creative, it's not true. That is absolute bullshit. It's just, it releases things. And also too, it's like, you have more, it becomes an outlet. It becomes a tool of sobriety. Do you know what I mean? Like writing becomes a tool of my sobriety. So it's like, oh yeah, I do outreach and I read and I be of service and all, but then there's also like write, yeah. And even if it's just journaling, some stuff comes because I feel like I write way more now, than I ever have. And even too, it's like, aside from just comedy, like in my life, and this is, from friends, like this is from people that have been in my life for, years and years. I lost a lot of people. No, I didn't lose a lot of people, but I definitely lost people. There are my stoners, my potheads that were like, okay, and they just drifted. And it was sort of like, I mean, I had a couple people that were like, well, I'm out. And I was just like, okay, bye. And then, a couple of them have come back. Yeah. A very dear friend of mine, 4.5 years ago, like mocked me and was like, okay, whatever. And like was gone. And then she fell in love with a sober man who was actually a sober addict. And, and then was just like, what am I doing? And, that was 4.5 years ago. They've been married now for 6 months. And she herself is, she might have a glass of wine, but she's pretty much sober. And since she met him, like we're back, we're good, we're better than ever. And I'm so sorry. And I was like, yep, I get it. But I lost some friends. I for sure lost some friends, but then, the people that have stuck around, the ones that are clearly supposed to be in my life, the resounding answer is, oh, you're so much better. Yeah, because I'm present. Do you know what I mean? I listen. I don't think I was a very good friend. I was a very good friend as a nonstop, high person. Like, I don't think I was. I don't think I would listen too much, and I think I would rant more. And yeah, I know. I keep saying present, but that's what it is. And that's, I think that's one of the things with sobriety. It's like one day at a time, 1 minute at a time. We only have this moment. And I think that's what sobriety really teaches you, 1 hour at a time.
I keep saying that, like, the process of getting more present is like a process of getting closer to God, because there is this, like,
oh my God,
this sort of profound infinity in the present.
Absolutely.
And, yes. and it's, I haven't like quite figured out, but I definitely, like, when I feel completely taken care of, it's when I'm completely present,
Same. The minute I leave the moment is when trouble starts. You know what I mean?
Right,
like once,
totally.
like I, you know what I mean? It just is. Like when I have this, and it's not like, to explain to people, it's like, it's not like you don't think about anything. Like you're not an idiot. Like I spent all my money. No.
Right.
I know what I'm doing. I know what I'm doing tomorrow. I know what I'm doing Saturday. But once I start thinking about what I'm doing in August, that's when trouble happens. So it's like, oh, got to bring it back to today. And like, so I constantly, like, people right now in the pandemic, if you're not in a 12-step program, I don't know how the fuck you're doing this. I don't know how you're doing this, because this is like, we've been training for this. You know what I mean? This is the
Totally.
show. You know what I mean? This is it. Because it's like, living one day at a time is the only way I'm getting through this. The only way I'm getting through this. People are like, you know, my last 4 years. I'm just like, yep, I worry about today. I only worry about today. Today I'm safe. Today I'm healthy. Today I'm taken care of. And that's all I have to worry about. That's all I have to worry about. And that is, because I'm telling you, if I was high still, I would already be dead. Like there's no way I would have gotten through this.
How have you been filling your days, you know, having before the pandemic, performing all the time and, you know, being on the road and stuff, and like
it's hard. It's hard. You know, like it's hard. Like I think and it comes and goes. Like I think there's definitely been like, you know, weeks where I'm like, I'm gonna paint my TV room, and then I paint, you know, and then this week though, you know, this week it's been sort of a chill week. This week it's like I've had a couple of things and I get my things done. Right. But then it's also like it comes and goes. And again, I just take it. I'm not mad at myself if I do nothing. Right. I'm not mad at myself if I nap. You know, I'm just one day at a time. You know, one day at a time. Because also too, it's like one day doesn't impact your whole life. I mean, it can, but like one day, if all I did was go to a meeting, take a nap, and do the laundry, that's pleasant. That's plenty. Do you know what I mean? I go, okay, there we go. Did that today. And then, you know?
It's funny how sometimes you shit the bed on a day and then you're like, oh, I fucked that day up so hard. And then the next day you're like, well, I might as well not even show up today because I fucked up yesterday so hard. And I can do that. I can do that for a while before I'm like, whoa, pull up, man, pull up. Like, just do the fucking thing today and stop playing that dumb game. And then I actually start like the thing that I blew off that upset me in the first place, I do it and I'm like, oh, I'm not behind at all. Like that didn't affect anything. And I shouldn't have spent these 4 days beating myself up.
And it's like,
just done it.
And getting caught in this, I do this a lot, like where it's like you build something up so much. Do you know what I mean? That you go, I can't do that. I can't do it. I can't. And then you do it and you go, oh my God. You know what I mean? Like just like
you're just
small.
Like totally relieved.
Oh, I'm gonna organize that. I'm gonna organize that thing. And then you do it and then you're just like, well, that's done. There we go. You know, I think as an addict, you know, I definitely like chaos. I like drama. Like I think a lot of us do. I want things to be, you know, like smooth sailing sounds terrifying and boring, but it's fantastic. You know, I think a lot of addicts, we want up and down, up and down, up and down, but it's the smooth sailing that you think, oh, that seems so dull, but it's not. There's something lovely about slightly dull. You know what I mean? It's like my life isn't dull. I have a great life, but oftentimes I find myself wanting drama. And it can be wanting drama of not doing something, then having to do it at the last minute. No God, and it's just so silly. Like you know, my disease tricks me all the time. Yeah. And then you know, you have that moment, you get centered, you know, back to clarity, and then you're like, no, this is better. This just works better. It just works better.
Totally. Well, Deb, that was great. I think
good.
That was really good. Like, you know.
Fantastic.
Let's not beat it to death. Let's just be thankful it was.
Let's not beat it to death. We've had a nice time, and there we go.
Yeah. Hey, so if you've been enjoying this podcast, you can feel completely free to support it with a financial contribution at www.patreon.com/thedrunkalogs.